programs. Okay, I got it. Sorry. Hey. And as you can tell, I am not a professional audio-visual person or a professional speaker, so take it easy on me. So we're going to talk about two programs here, basic two programs, which is the FHA 203K and the Homestyle renovation loans, which basically are the same thing. One is the HUD program, one is the conventional loan. There's also a couple others. Freddie Mac's loan has a program, and the VA has a program. Basically, what they do is they're going to finance the purchase of the home as well as the renovations. This also can be done as a refinance, which I know you guys don't do. So why would any of you want to do this program? There's a couple of reasons which really jump out today. Low inventories, no entry-level inventory, no low-income inventory. And I know everybody's heard some of the stories that these, they did one of these programs 10 years ago, and it took forever, and it was a real pain. That is not the case anymore. I can tell you the banks are very much up on these programs. They're Johnny on the spot. And in addition to that, I do the work for you guys, for the realtor. So it's very little different for you. But talking about this, the big thing in Connecticut and in New England, the average home, the age of the average home is 58 to 75 years. So what does that mean to you? I mean, it means you go out and you look at these older houses. The people love the neighborhood, but the house is outdated, doesn't have the new style bathrooms or kitchens, or the mechanics, or maybe mechanicals. So those are all things that we can do. I mean, we can put the new kitchens in the bathrooms. We can add the master suites. We can add garages, bonus rooms. We're really not limited as to what we can do with this. And these programs are not just for distressed properties, as you see as we go through here. Here's a great example. So you can see on the left, this was a typical 1940s, 50s Cape Cod house. On the right is what we did to this house. This house was in the Shelton area. And what we did is you can see we dormered out the front of it. We put a full master bedroom suite with bathroom, updated the bathrooms in the house, and we redid the whole front of the house. So you can see that that's really pretty contemporary based on today's neighborhoods. This was about $150,000 renovation. So which loan is best for you? FHA 203K. Basically, it's a 3.5% down minimum, lower FICO scores, primary residence only, and it must meet FHA guidelines. FHA guidelines, as most of you know, nationally, they have guidelines as to how much you can borrow in each part of the country. So you have to come under those guidelines. The Fannie Mae Homestyle, you can get away with 5% down. No guidelines, you can borrow as much as the house will appraise out for. Higher FICOs are required. You can do luxury improvements being high-end kitchens, hot tubs, swimming pools, that type of thing. You could do these on primary, secondary homes, and investment properties, which is a big thing. And we're going to talk about that a little bit more in one of these pictures. The two different kinds of the 203K programs, there's two different styles, basically the limited and the standard. The limited is really for properties where the improvements are going to be $35,000 or less, and no structural repairs. This is a great tool for you guys, and this is how you can use this tool. You go through, you sell the property, you go through it, you look at it. The seller says, I'm selling it as is. You go out and look at it, you have your inspection done. The inspector says, hey, it needs a roof and it needs a boiler. You go back to the seller. The seller says, no, I'm not participating, but the buyer really likes the property. This is a perfect way to use the limited. You can finance that roof and that boiler over the next 30 years, and they still end up getting the house that they like. You do not need a consulting for that. I wouldn't be involved in that. On the standard, I am involved, and I'm involved right up front. You need greater supervision. Greater supervision would be architectural exhibits like septic and well inspections, architectural drawings, that type of thing. Usually the minimum they'll do on that is $5,000, which I've never done one for $5,000. And there's draws up to 6 draws. Questions on anything so far? Sue?
Yeah, and I just want to remind you guys, go ahead and put your questions into the chat and I'll read them out as was mentioned before. I did have someone private message me, what would be the right time to contact you for the HUD inspection?
The HUD inspection, you can contact me anytime for a HUD inspection. The earlier I get involved in the deal, the better off it is for you and for the client. Typically, I get involved after the initial inspection.
Okay, but so if somebody's thinking that the house is going to need remodeling, they could contact you for the initial inspection. You could turn it into a HUD?
Yes, we can do the inspection and the HUD part of it. And I do that a lot. If I do the inspection, which we're going to talk about in a little bit, if I do the inspection, I include the HUD assessment as part of the inspection. So it saves them a little money and it saves them a little time.
Okay, great. And one more question. You mentioned about draws. What do you mean about draws?
The draws we're going to get into, and I'll explain how those work. Okay, I've got a perfect slide for that coming up.
Okay, and actually, let's cover one more question. Can you do it on a home that you already own?
Yes, this can be done as part of a refinance. And I actually do a lot of refinance programs.
Okay, and I think you cover, do you talk about what percentage of the selling price can be borrowed? Do you talk about that going forward?
Yeah, just as we did, but it's basically 3.5%, all but 3.5% on FHA and all but 5% on a Homestyle or conventional renovation program.
Okay, all right. And just to confirm, you'll talk about, a draw is basically it's the money that they're getting out of the
Yes.
project, and you'll go into that. Okay, all right. We'll continue with questions in a little bit. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So here we're going to talk about all those things. And what this is the steps to the sale, which is basically the same as you do on every other deal. You get an accepted offer, you show the property. Now you have 2 different scenarios. This is a scenario where we talked about with the roof and the boiler. That's a perfect time to do a limit in. Or you go and you look at the house. The people love the house. It's in one of those outdated neighborhoods. They really want a kitchen, a new bathroom, maybe a garage. That's the time now you call me. It's the HUD consultant. I come in and I do the assessment, and I do what they call a SOR, which is a schedule of repairs. After we do the schedule of repairs, I sit down with the client and the consultant, and the contractor, and we come up with a schedule of work. After the schedule of work is done, I do the work write-up. The work write-up is all the exhibits, all the things we talked about, all the inspections, septic inspection, well tests, all those things. I create a package for the lender. I send it to the lender. The property is appraised. The closing documents are created, and you go to the closing. So at this point, you're done. You get your check and you're done. I do the rest. So at this point, all you've done maybe is extras, as open up the property a couple extra times for me or the contractor to do the estimating. At that point, the renovations begin. The draw inspections are created. The draw inspections are the work. As the work is completed, I go out and inspect the work and make sure the work is done correctly based on our work write-up. And if the work has been done correctly, then I draw up a draw request. The draw request is sent to the buyer, who signs it and agrees to it and approves it. It is then sent to the contractor, who signs it and approves it, sends it back to me. I sign it and send it to the bank. And we can do that up to 6 times in the process. Usually we set out that draw inspection request up front, so we know how many we're going to do and how often we're going to do and when they're going to be done. So then the work is completed, the CO is issued, and we send the rest of the money to the builder. He gets his final check. and your client lives happily ever after. Again, here's another case study for you. This is an interesting one in Fairfield. You can see up at the left, this is the original house. Down on the right is the finished product. We did quite a bit of work on this house, including a new kitchen, dining room, windows, bathrooms, more or less renovated the whole thing. And this was like a $200,000 project. This is the kitchen before. As you can see, and I'm sure many of you have seen many kitchens like this in Connecticut. This is the dining room, the before and the after, and we actually took the dining room, the kitchen, and flip-flop where they were. And you can see how beautiful the dining room is now. This is the kitchen. I mean, who wouldn't want this kitchen? I mean, these are the kind of things that we can do. So again, this is not just for distressed properties. These are for any type of properties. This happens to be the living room, and you can see what we did there. All right, again, questions, more questions.
Yeah, so actually, I just want to go over the draw a little bit more. You know, a draw is like in new construction, right? When somebody's doing a construction loan, they're getting money as it goes through the process of building. Same with a renovation. Is that correct, George?
It's the exact same thing. The exact same thing. Other than
Okay.
I'm the bank, instead of the bank going out for new construction, usually new construction, the bank has their own people that goes out and do the draw inspections.
Okay, and then you're mentioning between either, you know, one draw or 6 draws. Like, what's the difference? Why would someone only need 1 draw versus maybe 4 or 6 draws?
Where one draw would be is where you have a structural repair or like a septic repair. You have to put a new septic system in because the septic failed. So it has to be done with a consultant because of the intensity of the project. So what happened is we would pay the septic contractor when everything was completed. So he would get 1 draw. Or the same thing if we were doing a roof or a structural repair where they had to replace timbers in an attic or in the basement. So what happens, that would be considered structural repair. So the bank would want a consultant. So we would do that as 1 draw or 2 draws. Typically, the number of draws is usually based on the amount of work that's done. Where, as an example, you're putting a 2nd floor addition on the house. So you would probably do 1 draw for the demolition, 1 draw for the framing, 1 draw for the rough-ins, being the electrical, the plumbing, and the interior framing. Then another one when the drywall and all that was done, and then a final one when everything is completed. So that's usually how the draws work. And again, the draws have to be approved by everybody. It has to be approved by the buyer first. So the buyer is happy with the fact that he knows where the money's going, who's getting money, and when they're getting money.
Okay. A couple of questions about a contractor. First of all, who selects the contractor, and do you have a list of contractors the buyer can select from?
The buyer initially selects the contractor. He has total control of that. In other words, he's only going to pick somebody he's comfortable with. The contractor does have to be approved by the bank, has to be licensed in the state of Connecticut, has to have liability insurance, and the bank has their own vetting process. Every bank usually has a different vetting process for the contractors.
And some banks that do these loans do have lists of contractors.
Yes, and we have contractors that we work with all the time. The contractors that we work with, the contractors we have history with that we worked with in the past. All of them have done this type of loan before and are very familiar with them. And that's usually the issue when it comes down to the contractor, whether they're familiar with working with these programs or not, because they do have to bid it in a little different process that we'll explain to as we're going forward.
Okay, and then this came in earlier. Is it beneficial to have the contractor at the home inspection / HUD inspection?
It is very helpful if the contractor can be there when we do the assessment. The assessment is what we do after the inspection or as part of the inspection. And as we're going through the schedule of repairs. So yes, that's very helpful if the contractor can be there.
Okay. And then a question came in, who ensures the contractor doesn't take advantage of the buyer by way of price gouging, excessive change orders and et cetera, running off with the money?
Me and the bank. The contractor doesn't get any money until the buyer, the bank, and myself approve of it. On a limited, let me just back up, on a limited 203K, there's two payments because there's no consultant involved. There's usually two payments. 50% of it's given up front at the closing and 50% of it is given when the work is completed. And I always tell people when I'm involved in it, even on a limited, is when they get the 50% up front, do not pay the contractor until the work is started.
Okay, we've got great questions here. This is awesome. Who chooses what items are used? The new buyer? Question mark. So,
Okay. Yes, the new buyer is the one who picks cabinets, fixtures, all that stuff. However, it does come under pricing, whatever pricing restrictions you have on, the appraisal. And a lot of that, just as another comment, a lot of times what happens is the contractor, when they bid these, they'll bid kitchen cabinets. I'm going to give you a $10,000 allowance for cabinets. So you can spend up to $10,000 on cabinets and you're great. If you spend $11,000, the contractor pays $10,000 and you write a check for the other $1,000.
All right. And so Marissa has a client wanting to do this. They already had a home inspection. Do they have the contractor comes first with a quote to you, or do you do the assessment first?
No, I should do the assessment first. I do the assessment first, then I sit down with the client and work up the schedule of repairs. And what the schedule of repairs is what I do is we sit down and we say, okay, here's your house. What do you want to do? I want to replace the bathroom. Okay, do we want to replace the toilet, the sink, the tub? Do we want to gut the bathroom? Do we want to put all new tile in? So that it becomes a big discussion as to what we're going to do. And we try to accommodate the client as much as possible. So, and normally we can do that.
Okay. I have a bunch more questions, but I'm going to have you continue on just to see if you can answer some of these questions within your presentation. So go ahead. Thank you.
Okay. So as a HUD consultant, what I have to do is I have to go out and I have to do the assessment on the property, and I have to ensure that the property meets what they call HUD 4000.1 guidelines, which just means the house is habitable and it will meet HUD guidelines when all the work is completed. So what that encounters is like the things you see upstairs, the smoke detectors all have to meet Connecticut standards, wood destroying insect, health and safety issues. You've probably all run into these at different times with HUD appraisers or FHA appraisers. Safety things are railings, peeling paint, or it could be lead paint. All those things have to be addressed. Major systems, structure and mechanicals. When we go through and we do the assessment, we have to look at the mechanicals, the boiler, whatever heating system you have, the electrical. You have a 60 amp electrical panel that has fuses in it. That has to be updated. Whether you want to or not, it would have to be updated because that's what you need to do to meet HUD standards. You have a heating system that's 25 years old. I can't say that has more than 2 or 3 years life expectancy in it. So that would have to be included in it also. And that's what we're talking about when we replace existing systems. Private wells and septic systems, they have to be inspected and have to have a water quality test. If there is connections to public water or sewer, that has to be incorporated into it. In other words, if you have the ability to connect to public water and sewer, you have to do that. However, there's always exceptions to the rules, and there has been exceptions to the rules for those. And what I've run into with those in the past is that for you to connect to the public water, it's going to be $15,000, and we're doing a $10,000 renovation. That would be considered excessive. And as long as your well meets Connecticut standards and the water quality meets Connecticut standards, they normally would give you an inspection for that. And all those things can be incorporated into the inspection. If I'm the inspector, if Tiger does the inspection, I include all that as part of the home inspection, so we don't have to address it again at the assessment. The purchase guidelines, again, here's what we're going to go through with this. The house has to appraise out. What does that mean? That means that the purchase price of the house and the price of the rehab, whatever we're going to do for rehabs, has to be within the appraised value of what the appraiser says. In other words, if you're financing 95% of the total purchase and rehab, when the contract and when the appraiser goes out and appraises that, it has to be within those parameters. However, sometimes with FHA, a lot of the banks will allow you to go up to 110% of the appraised value. But that's really up to the bank. Every bank has their own overlays for that type of thing. So what type of house are eligible for these type of programs? Pretty much everything. Single family homes, of course, 1 to 4 unit apartments. What does that mean? If you had a 5 or a 6 family house and you wanted to convert it back to these type of guidelines, you could convert it back to a 4 family house or a 3 family house, and you could borrow the money to do that. Condominiums, we can do condominiums, but for interior improvements only. How does that work? You're selling a condominium, has an old bathroom, an old kitchen, we can renovate the kitchen or the bathroom. Mixed use properties, where those really come into, which is pretty
check payable
cool,
to Keller Williams.
is you have a mixed use property where you have a retail unit on the first floor, 2 apartments on the second floor. You can renovate those second floor apartments. You can't do the retail unit, but you can do the apartments on the second floor, second or third floor. And then there's other programs that are available through local governments, for local governments and eligible nonprofits. I've never done those. What expenses can be included? Here's where we break down to what the contractor has to do. The contractor has to break down his bids by labor and material. Labor and material has to be disclosed and has to be included as part of the work write-up. The contingency reserve on every loan that HUD does, whether it's an FHA or a Homestyle, there has to be a contingency reserve. The contingency reserve is usually 10 to 15% of the total project. That money is used for things that are unforeseen at the time of the assessment. It can be a couple different things. I have one right now on Lake Candlewood where they're doing a total kitchen renovation. They demoed the kitchen and the back wall was completely rotted out. They have to replace the back wall on there. So we took the money from the contingency reserve to do that. You can also finance up to 6 months of the mortgage payments if the property is uninhabitable at the time of the assessment or when the project starts. And then permits, inspections, all that type thing can be included in the renovation fees, so that you are only putting down 3.5 to 5%. Is there a time limit for renovations? Yes. The work has to start within 30 days of the closing, and it should be done within 6 months of the closing time or when the work starts. However, as all of you probably heard, there's been big delays with materials are back ordered. Windows right now are taking 12 to 16 weeks to order. Kitchen cabinets, the same thing. So the banks are being very flexible and usually are giving extensions as long as it's within those type of parameters. Okay, here's my favorite renovation of the 12 years I've been doing this. This is, believe it or not, this was an old barn that was built in the late 1800s. Then in the 1920s, it was converted into a house, and they really used it as a speakeasy. And when we were going through doing the assessment, we found the secret room with the bar in it, with the secret panel behind the fireplace. And the new people that bought this is a second home. People live in New York, and this was going to be their second home in Litchfield. And they did this project because interest rates were so low, it made more sense for them to borrow the money, do this project, than take the money out of his savings. So we did this. This is a very creative project. The wife is a glass blower, and so we turned the house around. So now you're looking at the front. It's the front of the house. You can see we added on a metal roof, added on the garage, and like I said, we converted the front entrance down to, actually, you really can't see the front entrance. It's where that young man is standing there, and there's a new front entrance. But we did a lot of complete renovation on this. We did bathrooms, kitchens, full exterior painting, new deck, did a lot of work on this. This was the kitchen, and it was just an old outdated Home Depot kitchen on the left. We put a whole new kitchen on the right, and what we did is we opened it all up, including the ceilings and the walls, and made it a real country style kitchen. So required improvements. We are required to do certain things that we have to do, improve thermal efficiency. What that comes into play is we look at the house. It's an old house, has no insulation in the attic. So that would be a requirement. We got broken windows, holes in the walls, or voids in the walls. Those are all have to be closed up and sealed. Same thing with weather stripping for windows and doors, that type of thing. Also, smoke and carbon monoxide detectors have to be brought up to Connecticut standards, as well as GFCI protection wherever that would be needed. Energy efficient programs and solar programs. Yes, you can finance solar programs, new windows, hybrid water heaters. This is a different program. And what happens is these programs, you could finance 100% of the cost of those materials, regardless of the appraised value. The caveat with this is whatever the cost of those improvements, the benefit to the buyer has to be greater. In other words, if it was going to cost you $100, or cost you $50 a month to finance those solar panels for the next 30 years, you would have to save more than $50 a month on your mortgage payment. Where I've been able to use this, which is kind of creative, different times, when we have a little bit of an appraisal issue, we're $5,000 or $10,000 apart, I've been able to move the windows, water heaters, that type thing into this program so it doesn't affect the appraised value. This is how HUD consultants get paid. Basically what we're talking about here, this is the money on the left is based on the total cost of renovations. So if you're doing a renovation, not the purchase price, just the renovation, if the renovation is going to cost $30,000 to $50,000, the consultant's fee is $700. If the renovation fees are going to be $100,000 or more, the consultant cost is $1,000. That is the max fee you can charge on a HUD program, one of the 203Ks or the Homestyle. So disbursement of the funds, how do we control the funds and how do we protect the funds? So the fees for the consultant and draw fees are all paid by the bank or out through the bank at closing or through the draw process. The draw process, like we talked about, there can be up to 6 draws. What they usually mean by the 6 draws is normally there's 5 construction draws and then 1 final draw, which we do after the CO has been issued, and that pays the contractor's final money. The bank holds back usually 10% on all of these loans. What that means is we have a draw for $10,000. They take 10% out of the draw and they hold that in reserve until the work is done. That is to hold the contractor accountable to make sure the work is done on a timely basis and on a professional basis. And then his final draw will include that 10% holdback. The contingency reserve, like we talked about before, is usually 10 to 15%. That is usually determined by the condition of the house, meaning if the utilities are not on, you'd have a 15% contingency reserve. If the utilities are all on and working, you'd have a 10% contingency reserve. That does come into play with some banks if there is structural issues. If there is structural issues, they're going to be part of the program. The bank can require that to be a higher contingency reserve. And then the final draw is done again after the certificate of occupancy has been issued. This is what a draw request looks like. There's 35 line items on the left-hand side of the page. everything that HUD does goes through these 35 line items, and they're basically all the different things that can be done on the project. And then what happens is after we do the work write-up, in the work write-up, the draw request is included as part of it. And then we set up a draw schedule, usually as part of the work write-up. And then I go out, I do the draw request. On each draw request, I go through, and column 2 is what the request is for. And then, of course, it is signed and sent to the bank. Here's another one. This was a nice one. This is one of those ones that we were talking about, where you got the old neighborhood people. It's an entry level, first time home buyer, likes the house, but you can see on the left, the house, the siding is in tough shape. The windows are old. So we replaced the siding, we replaced the windows. It was at a cost of about $50,000 for all of it. And then they got a nice new house. And then again, this is one of the real good before and afters. This was another one of those outdated houses built back in the 30s or 40s in a very desirable neighborhood. And we did a full renovation on this. You can see in the after picture, we redid the second floor. We added the dormers. We added a master bedroom, a master bathroom, a whole master suite. We added a second bathroom upstairs with a couple extra bedrooms, and then a bonus room over top of the garage. We turned the garage from a single garage into a double garage, and then changed the whole front facade. So, questions?
Yes. Oh, sorry. I was trying to unmute myself. All right. So we did have some questions come in, but you did answer those as you were going through the presentation. I just want to remind you all, we will send out the recording. So if you missed the answer, it will be in the recording. So just want to reiterate, George. So if a closing time frame in a contract is 45 to 60 days, are the realtors still going to be able to close this out with their clients within that time frame?
They should be able to. It usually does take an extra week or two to complete everything as far as the contractors and the work write-up is done. So if we do get involved early on, right away, that should not be a problem.
Okay, and then I think you mentioned this a little bit, but just to reiterate, so if there's a set price in the renovation and there's increases, how is that handled?
Well, it depends on what the increases are. I mean, if it's an increase just because the contractor didn't bid properly, I mean, that's pretty much on him. If there's an increase because there's something that happened for unforeseen, and we've had many things happen, and usually does something happens. I've had to replace water heaters because the water heater died during the construction. So we replaced the water heater and took it out of the contingency. I've had issues where the well has gone bad during the construction period. So we replaced the well pump. And it can be other things too. It could be, I had one just recently where they put an addition on the back of the house and put new vinyl siding on the addition. And the new siding looked great. The old siding on the rest of the house didn't look so good. So we put new siding on the rest of the house at the same time. So those are things that we can do with the contingency reserve. A lot of that is controlled by the bank, but most banks are very flexible about that. It's an FHA. If it's an FHA loan, anything we do with the contingency is supposed to be health and safety related. However, again, most of the banks are pretty flexible on that.
Okay, and do contractors have to be vetted by HUD prior to being hired?
They have to be vetted by the bank. HUD does not loan any money. The money is loaned by the bank. The bank is responsible for all vetting. All banks do vet the contractors.
Okay, and does the town come in and have to inspect?
Yes, the town has to do all the inspections they normally would do. Town inspections take precedence. And what I mean by precedence is each town has their own requirements as far as the codes are concerned. All renovations have to meet town building codes.
Okay, can appliances be included in a renovation?
Yes.
And can a buyer live in the property while improvements are being done?
As long as it's habitable. And I usually determine what's habitable and inhabitable.
As a consultant, okay. And so you did mention the time frame being 6 months that the project has to be done, but with things that are going on, do you know if there's an absolute like cutoff time frame that the banks are allowing them to go more than 6 months?
Yes, I mean, no. In 12 years, I've never been cut off by the bank. In other words, I've never had the bank cut off a project. As long as everything's done within reason, most of the banks are, like I say, are very flexible with that. And what's happening, because due to COVID, I mean, like I said, I mean, a lot of materials, kitchens, a kitchen could take 6 months, depending upon what you're ordering for kitchen cabinets and stuff like that. Same thing, custom windows or custom doors. So the banks are familiar with that, and they are prepared to make exceptions for that.
Okay, and maybe you can just reiterate a little bit, because this is the second question that's come in kind of about buyers and sellers. Like, who's responsible for signing the paperwork? I mean, the buyer's the one that's taking this loan. So the seller, once they close, the seller's out of the transaction, correct?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, the seller's out of it just like any other time. So, I mean, when you guys close, he's done, he's gone. And the same thing actually with the realtor. After the closing, the realtor has no responsibility whatsoever unless they want to be involved.
Right. So basically, the transaction might take a week or two longer to close, but it's pretty much the same for the seller and the agent.
Correct. The only thing the agent sometimes has to do is, like I said, would have to make accessibility for the contractor or for myself.
And if building materials go up in price, who's in charge of that?
The contractor is supposed to allow for that. So in other words, when we check the prices and when we go through the prices, and I have to verify the prices on the contractor's bids. I mean, we usually allow 10 to 20% for increases right now. Because nobody can control that.
Right. I mean, so far, I've saved one of the good questions, I think, for last, George, because we have some time here. Can you share a story with us? Like, how long did your last renovation take, and what was the cost? Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, I did a house up in Tolland where this was a very interesting one. The contractor had built the house, bought the house, and started renovations, and decided that he was going to renovate the house for his son. Started the renovations and stopped, and then sold the house. So the house was actually gutted down to the studs, and a local person bought it, and we went in and did it all, just finished all the construction. And it was a $225,000 renovation, but basically all we did was finish the work that he had started. And it was a nice house. So and that took we were in and out of there in 4 months. Actually, I was really surprised the contractor was able to do the work as fast as he did.
Okay. Also, so I think you also had shown a picture of renovation on the Cape. That was I think it was the last one you showed. Is that correct?
Yeah.
How long did that one take, if you recall, and how much was that one?
That one took longer than 6 months. You talk about that one?
I think so. Yes. Yeah.
Yeah, that one took longer than 6 months. Again, that was basically because of materials, and we ran into an issue structure-wise with the garage, the bonus room over that. We thought we were going to be able to do it with the existing garage, and we were not able to do that. So we had to pour a new slab and footings, and we had to get approved and go through zoning. So it did take a little longer to go through the zoning to get approval. And the bank worked with us on that. So I think that one was, closer to 9 months. But we got exceptions for the time, and we got it done.
Great. So Cindy has a question. When doing inspections, does the age of the major item, like a furnace, make a difference in as far as I didn't write the question down and now I lost it. Okay. When doing inspection, does the age of the major item, like a furnace, make a difference, even if it works fine? So
Okay.
if you're doing a renovation, if a furnace is working fine, you might not be replacing that, correct? Or
Well, here's the way that works, and that it depends on what kind of a loan it is. If it is a 203K loan, and it's an old furnace that has less likelihood of 2 to 3 years, then yes, that would have to be included in it. Now, there could be exceptions to everything, but if you go into a 203K, what we're doing is we're making sure that that house has to meet HUD minimum standards when the renovations are done. HUD minimum standards is you have a good working heating system. So it would not have any bearing on the sale. It would just have bearing on what we do as far as renovations are concerned. But do we have to go in? Do we force people to put new heating systems in? No. But we do have to look at that as what the well-being is for the client, the buyer himself. But again, that doesn't have anything to do with the sale. That just has to do with part of the scope of repairs.
so I have a question here. How does a buyer go ahead and make the offer when they don't know the extent of the repairs and what the cost will be? I mean, that's really where you help them figure it out. Is that correct?
Right. Yes. And again, that depends when we get involved in the deal. Usually the offer has been made before we get involved. That doesn't have to be the case. We can get involved right in the beginning of the whole transaction. But if that is the case and we look at the house and then, we would do what they call a scope of repairs, and we do a cost estimating, which usually is based on square footage or that type of thing to come up with a general idea of what we're looking at for repairs.
Okay, I have a shout out to you, George. This is from Deborah. It says, hi, George. You worked with one of my buyers earlier this year. Thank you again for all of your expertise in assisting my buyer. They are thrilled with their new house. Lenders are the key in this process as well. So
thank you.
Kudos to you. Any other questions? Kira, do you want to, where are we at, George? Do you have some more to go through?
That's it. No, I'm at. The only thing I would like to say is please, I am available. If you need help, you have questions on any of it, even if you just have questions on the program, I'm very happy to answer any questions about the program, whether you're working with a buyer or not working with a buyer. So, and the same thing as to when to get me involved. I mean, I'm willing to get involved at any point with you. So, there it is.
Okay. Hey, George, do you have certain banks that you work with?
I work with almost all the banks. More and more banks are getting involved in this. I do have banks that send me a lot of work. I do a lot of work for several banks, which is a great resource for me. But yeah, I work with most all the banks.
Okay. And yeah, somebody wants George's information. That's going to come up in a minute on the next slide. If you want to go ahead and advance the presentation.
Yeah.
There you go. Go ahead, Kara.
Okay. Hi, everybody. It's Kara again. Just a few things about Tiger and choosing the right HUD consultant and home inspector through this process. You obviously want to work with a home inspection company that is fully licensed and fully insured. In the state of Connecticut, insurance is not required for any home inspection company. So obviously you want to be referring your clients to reputable businesses. Customer service, George, Sue, and I are always available to you to answer your questions about the renovation loan process, as well as anything about our home inspection services as well. And then, of course, working with companies that are adhering to Connecticut standards and have a great reputation and experience out there. As you know, George Turner is incredibly experienced. I think he does 40 to 50 of these loans per year for clients across the state of Connecticut. So happy to work with you. On the next slide, we're going to have all of our contact information. Please do feel free. to, where is our contact information? I will email it to all of you. I do apologize for that. I'm going to email you with a link to our YouTube channel that will have this program on it, as well as all of our contact information, most importantly, George's. And lastly, our raffle winner today is Cindy Hartung from Berkshire Hathaway, I believe. So thank you so much, Cindy, and we will reach out to you and mail that off to you.
So,
Okay.
Kara, before we end, because we do have a few more minutes and a couple questions came in. Oh, and there's our contact information. So people can jot that down while we're talking. But basically, you know, someone wants to know about when a buyer is making an offer on the house, do they just offer the seller what they want to pay for that house, or do they include what they think?
No. They do an offer just like any other offer. In other words, the renovations really come into play after they've agreed on a purchase price. As far as the buyer and seller are concerned, as far as the transaction is concerned.
Right. So basically what it sounds like you're saying is, you know, the transaction for the seller and the realtor are pretty much the same. I mean, it becomes a lot. Right.
Yeah, it's exactly the same.
Okay, great. Any more questions, or I think we're good. That was an excellent presentation. Thank you so much, George. And I'm getting lots of thank yous, great information coming in, great session. So again, we appreciate you all joining us today, and Kara will be sending out a follow-up email.